Hello everyone, I hope you're having a great day and welcome back to Spar&Brawl. My name is Cam Kompani and I'm one half of your hosting duo, and as always I'm joined by my friend and intellectual sparring partner Sam Danishvar. Sam, what do you have for us this week?
Hi everyone, hope you're having a great day. Well, this week is quite interesting. We have a big major story about Azerbaijani Armenian situation, the Caucasus region, and few updates about Indian politics and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be exciting, I hope.
Yeah, and we also have a story which is based on investigation from Democratic Republic of Congo, which in it shows that at least 50 women have said that they've been sexually abused and exploited by WHO officials and other leading NGOs during the Ebola crisis, which was from 2018 to 2020. So we're going to cover that sad story and a bunch of coronavirus vaccine related stories, including how Operation Warp Speed from the US is being funded. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into our big story of the week, which is the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. So Sam, this latest installment of it kind of all erupted last Sunday. So please take us back to last Sunday, work forward, and then we'll go back and give a more historical overview as well as the regional implications.
Um, all right, yeah, for sure. Well, last Sunday, actually, I think I was one of the first people who was notified about that, and I messaged you because it happened very early in the morning or late at night. I don't remember, but there were. It seems none of this is for sure yet because two sides are at war, and the two sides are obviously biased when they give us any information. But it seems that let's just say this, there is a region within the Caucasus that Armenia controls but is legally recognized as a part of Azerbaijan by the UN and pretty much everybody. And last Sunday, there have been conflicts before over this region. Last Sunday, again, these conflicts basically spilled over into a real war. And it seems Azeri side has started the attack and started attacking to take back its legally owned land, and obviously Armenians are fighting back. Um, this recent escalation is kind of following, a slight flare up in July. That there were slight clashes, guns being shot at either both sides. I think I don't remember if anybody died in July. I'm just checking. But this time around, a lot of people have died, both soldiers and civilians. But that's the gist of it, that there is this region in Armenia populated by ethnic Armenians, largely 94%, I believe.
Okay, I
It
thought
is,
the area fell within Azerbaijan.
yeah, the area is legally recognized as a part of Azerbaijan, but it is populated by our ethnic Armenians. I believe 94%. Um, and these two nations basically have been war since the fall of Soviet Union. And yeah, just that's the situation we're to be fair, we just this just came in while we are recording this. About 10 minutes ago, Armenia seemed to have accepted the ceasefire proposed by international community, mainly US, Russia, and France. So we'll see if it's a real ceasefire. We'll see if Azerbaijan accepts it. But so far, basically, there's a fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan over a piece of land legally belonging to Azerbaijan, populated by ethnic Armenians, and and Azerbaijan seems to be on the stronger side for now.
So,
But we'll get into
okay.
details.
And so the fighting has been limited to that area so far, right?
Not really, no. Actually, it's interestingly very quickly got a. I mean, it depends on how would you limit and how would you not limit a war, I suppose. But there was actually, I'll get into that in more details, but there were apparently five missiles that hit an Iranian village in Iranian Azerbaijan, which was a sad thing. Apparently, one child maybe was injured, or I don't know. I hope the child is not dead, but who knows?
Okay, I see. And so what? And yeah, what have been the casualties like from the past week? In the
The
dozens? I read there were like dozens from each side, right? And then hundreds of injured people.
Yeah, it seems there are more casualties on the Armenian side. Azerbaijan is not officially releasing its losses. Basically, it's apparently I watch from the things I watch. Only the leadership seems to know. They are not official. There has been videos of people burying soldiers, so definitely, but it seems to be in dozens and hundreds. To be honest, quite a few civilians in the early days. There were 7 Armenians in villages were hit. A child and a mother were killed. So, but it's probably going to be less civilians as we go on because they're evacuating all the villages on the area.
Yeah. So in terms of since this area falls technically within Azerbaijan, that means Azerbaijan probably already had some kind of military presence and troops there. So has Armenia sent over troops there?
No, no, no. I thought you know this, to be honest. This, yeah, yeah. No, because it's like Balkan conflict. It's just so many little details. Caucasus and Balkans are great for just civil war conflict. Anyways, it's awful. War is always awful. But no, okay. I have to give you the historical background. Shall
Okay,
we
yeah, I was gonna
just
ask you that, but let's start there. Go.
Yeah, let's dive into this. All right. Following the fall of the Tsar and then the establishment of, Soviet Union, obviously, Stalin takes over the Soviet Union, and then Stalin's policy, it seems, obviously, people who are very critical of him argue, was to create these regions on the borders that they were a bit disputed, that would allow him to potentially intervene in ethnic or civil conflicts in Turkey and in Iran. So that's why the way that region was organized during the Soviet era was very problematic. So, how do I mean problematic? You have the Caucasus, and the Caucasus before the Russian, Soviet, and Russian imperial rule were ruled by Turkic speaking people, but usually with Armenian vassals. There was very limited ethnic conflict. It was kind of a peaceful coexistence. In the Soviet Union, what you have, Soviet Union, although it was a dictatorial state, very centralized, people forget it was a union. You had all these so-called independent republics. You had a Soviet Azerbaijan, and then you had a Armenia, right, within the Soviet Republic. Then you had this Karabakh region. By the way, it's called Nagorno-Karabakh, but I just go Karabakh because that's like easier for me. Anyway, then you had this Karabakh region and the surrounding regions that were largely, I believe, based on estimates, more than 60% was Armenian population, right? That region was put inside the Azerbaijani Soviet, right? But there were always tensions leading to basically Soviets actually allowing them to become an autonomous region within Soviet Republic, within Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan, right? Then you get to end of Soviet Union. So, this is going on. This is what's happening for all of Soviet. Then you get 1988, I think, when there are protests, when there are uprisings, people from Karabakh, they want to join, they want to unify with Armenia, and they are suppressed by Soviet forces. And then after you have the fall, after the Soviet collapses, that in that region they hold a referendum, just like many other post-Soviet states that they hold a referendum and they decide to become independent. But Azeri people boycott this referendum because it's kind of like the Ireland situation, that should we have for example, if we want to have Northern Ireland unify with Ireland, should we have just Northern Ireland vote, or should we have the whole of Ireland vote? So Azeris, because they say that you don't include all of Azerbaijan, we boycott this vote. And uh, uh, but in that so obviously that referendum, independence wins, right? And independence and unification with Armenia. But Karabakh doesn't become unified with Armenia, and that's very key. What gets established there is a Republic of Arstak, which is an independent entity, kind of like Northern Cyprus situation, that nobody recognizes. I believe there are 7 states within the US that recognize the Republic of Arstak, and maybe 2 other countries. I don't think even Armenia doesn't recognize Republic of Arstak, if I'm not mistaken. And that comes more into recent development. But that's the historical background. Oh, and then after this, in 1990s, following the referendum, following the independence and the call for unification with Armenia or establishment of an independent republic, there is a war, significant, a very bloody war. And in that war, Armenia manages to take over the control over Karabakh and I believe 7 surrounding regions, right? Because if you look at the map right now, that I don't understand why they do that in most news stories. They show Karabakh, which is literally a landlocked region within Azerbaijan, and they say this region is controlled by Armenia. But that's not it. The surrounding regions that connect Karabakh to Armenia is also controlled by Armenian troops.
And these surrounding regions fall within Azerbaijan or Armenia?
Legally Azerbaijan.
Okay.
But controlled by Armenia.
So that's why my question was stupid. So Armenia has a presence despite the fact that it falls.
Yeah. It's all been for the last 30 years. It's been controlled by Armenia. Republic of Arstak has established a state. It's all under Armenian control. Armenia basically won the war.
So the republic that you just said is just a different name for this region right now at the moment.
It's Republic of Arstak is another name for Nagorno-Karabakh region's government.
Which is technically the official name.
No, it's just that Nagorno-Karabakh is one region. They control larger, you know what I mean? Like it's such small regions. Republic of Arstak is all of that, but in general, most people just say Karabakh or Nagorno-Karabakh, you know. And but Armenia basically won the war, and they managed to take over control that region and the areas that connect to Armenia. Now,
now it's Azerbaijan then who has sent in troops into this region.
That's why. Yeah, and that's why I
so complicated. So it's officially recognized as being part of Azerbaijan, but it is not only like populated by ethnic Armenians, which that part I understood, but is in fact controlled by Armenia. Okay.
Yeah, basically. But let's get into, I think that's, so you understand the basic historical background. But that's like the old historical background. Now we have to get into like recent historical background. So you have this group formed called Minsk Group, right? It's Russia, US and France largely. And by the way, France is a key thing here because France has a very high population of Armenian diaspora who are very rich, very influential, and Armenia is one of those countries that the diaspora is larger than the population within the country, right? I'm sure you've heard of him, Charles Aznavour. He was actually a famous French Armenian singer. He was even an ambassador from Armenia to UN.
Okay.
Legendary. I think he's sold more records than Elvis.
And I see.
Fantastic.
And maybe at the end of this segment,
Yeah.
you can tell us a little bit why Armenia has such a big diaspora. But yeah, please continue. Save that for after.
Yep. But so you had this Minsk group, and the Minsk group was trying to negotiate a peace settlement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. They've had sort of come to an understanding after 30 years of talks, 20 years of talks, but then about 5, 6 years ago, the talks sort of halted. I mean, Turkey is also part. I believe is an observing member of Minsk group. It's not a chair or any. It's not a really powerful position. Turkey even tried to have a sort of a increased contact and more relations with Armenia. Charles Aznavour that I mentioned actually played a role in that, trying to bring, because he's an Armenian of Anatolia, of Anatolian origins. So he has some connections with Turkey as well. He tried to bring Turkey and Armenia together, but the peace talks were not successful. I mean, uh, they didn't lead to. They were successful. There were good steps made, but there was nothing concrete. Nothing. Nothing. Um, then you have. Then I have to go into Armenian politics. So this is going to get a bit more complicated. Following the war in Armenia and Azerbaijan, you had a situation where Armenian politics was dominated by war veterans from this war, from war veterans from this region, pretty much until the latest president, Nikol Pashinyan. All presidents, prime ministers, all the leadership were born in Karabakh region. Were,
Wow.
were
So
yeah,
leadership
yeah,
for
were
all of the country, not that region. Now you're talking about like Armenia.
Yeah, exactly. Armenia. They were the most famous of them, Kucharian, if I'm not mistaken. He was a war commander in Karabakh. He was the former president, if I'm not mistaken. So these war veterans from Karabakh War, who was they won that war. They came to dominate Armenian politics, and as with many other countries within the former Soviet countries, there were a lot of corruption. There were a lot of money going missing, that type of thing. So these people dominated the Armenian politics for a long while. About 2 years ago, you had this protest movement in Armenia, the anti-corruption movement. And Armenia, unlike Azerbaijan, doesn't have a natural resource like oil, right? Because Aliyev family, I'll get into that. Aliyev family that controls Azerbaijan is possibly one of the most corrupt families, corrupt dictatorships even within former Soviet uh, countries. It's been implicated in Panama Papers. It's been implicated in every fucking major uh, international corruption case, right? But Armenia doesn't have a natural resource, so the Armenian state is not quite as powerful as Azerbaijani state. So the protest movement actually led to change in government, and you have people like Nikol Pashinyan, who was a journalist, who was an anti-corruption journalist, becoming the president of Armenia. And a lot of people in the West. I mean, I've mentioned them before, but there is this channel on YouTube, Visual Politics. They did a video saying these are good. These are signs for hope, for peace. Well, it doesn't look like that anymore. But Pashinyan comes to power. He's and that, in my view, I think that may be key to understanding why this conflict is happening now. And then Pashinyan sort of walks back from Armenia's commitment to Minsk group and says, and he seems to be pushing for the unification of Republic of Artsakh with Armenia, just getting rid of the independent Artsakh and unifying it with Armenia. And that may have also played into Azeri's decision to, attack now, because they see Armenia basically abandoning the peace process.
And Azerbaijan cares
That's
about this area because it also has, I mean, I just read quickly, some historical significance. to them, right? Like,
Yeah,
what? Yeah. Why does Azerbaijan care about that
they
place so much?
that's the thing. Visual politics, actually, in their video, they also say that it has no strategic value, it has no blah blah blah. First of all, it has significant strategic value. The pipelines that are supposed to take Azerbaijani gas from Caspian to Europe will pass through Karabakh region. So it has very much strategic value, not to mention its highlands. And highlands in terms of military is extremely important because you have the high ground. Right now, Armenia has the high ground because in terms of military, Azerbaijan is far superior right now. The only thing Armenia has is the highlands.
Yeah,
So
we
I do
talked
think
about the importance of high grounds when we talked about the China-India border conflict.
exactly. So it is actually valuable strategically, but by the way, Iran, the country we come from, has a very significant Azeri population. There are more Azeris in Iran than there are in Azerbaijan. I believe about 40% of Iranian like it's not a minority of, in like it's almost like a majority because I believe Persians are about 40% and Azeris are estimated between like 20 to 40%, depending on how you calculate, because it's just been, I mean, it's been people have been marrying each other for thousands of years now, so it's all been mixed up. So, yeah, and from that, I know that Karabakh does hold a special place in Azeris' imagination, in Iranians' even imagination. The whole Caucasus, yeah, I mean, you have to see, it's a very, I mean, I'm not particularly nationalistic, but Caucasus for Iranians, for Turks, and for Russians, both view it as theirs, kind of. So yeah, it does hold a special nostalgic place for a lot of people. So yeah, that's basically the historical development and the recent, more like recent few decades development. And then in the last few months, you have a flare-ups and then the sudden escalation into war. And Armenia was, until a day ago, both Armenia and Azerbaijan were rejecting the calls for ceasefire. And but today it seems Armenia just accepted it. I don't know if Azeri side will accept it, but that's a sign that probably Armenia is on the losing side right now. But I think now we can go on the international side,
Yeah,
which is
so you
also,
mentioned that you actually just mentioned that this ceasefire was kind of brokered by Russia, I think you said, France. So, and France, you actually, sorry, and the US,
and US.
and the US. Okay, and France, you kind of gave a little explanation about why they care about this region. I was thinking more because Macron maybe is just trying to position himself as like, this kind of deal broker, it seems, in different areas right now. But
That's the thing that you are right. When we come to the international aspect, it's very interesting because you had one country,
yeah, so start
because
country by country. So tell us the significance for France, Russia, US, and also Turkey. And then maybe in Iran, you touched on it, but also touch on that again, please.
sure. So let me start this way. You had international responses to this conflict. Everybody asked, called for a ceasefire. Everybody was calling for calm. You had one nation, Turkey, perhaps not surprisingly, but they stood out. They put their full support behind Azeri people and the Azerbaijani government, and they went in full in for supporting them. They say moral support, but there are reports that there are Syrian mercenaries and Turkmen mercenaries from Turkey being transported to Azerbaijan, and there were two Syrian fighters killed in the conflict last few days. So these seems to be, and there are hard evidence that Azerbaijan has hired Syrian mercenaries to protect its oil fields, right? And this is basically, what do you call it? This is definitely has This is something Turkey has done before. Turkey has used Turkmen mercenaries in Syria. They tend to avoid using their own soldiers
And
because,
there are
you know,
reports
just
that
like
they're and the reports that they're using Syrian mercenaries in Libya as well.
exactly, yeah, exactly. They definitely, I mean, I think that was proved, like they
Yeah.
definitely send Turkmen mercenaries to Libya as well. So Turkey has a
But what do you mean
strong
by
cultural
Turkmen? What's Turkmen mercenaries? Is it Turkish mercenaries?
Turkmen, uh, I guess you could, yeah, Turkmen is a bit different. I guess Turkmen are usually Turkmen is a historically problematic word, by the way. I mean, you have a country called Turkmenistan on the uh, east north side of Iran. Turkmen, basically, it's kind of like tribal Turkish people. That they, you know, it's you. I believe I may be wrong on that. It's a very problematic word, but a lot of Turkmens live in Syria, basically Syrian population with Turkish background. You have Turkmens in Iran, in northeast. Uh, More in Iran, they are not tribal, to be honest. They do urban settlements and all that. But yeah, it's a problematic word referring to certain people from certain specific tribes and backgrounds. So yeah, maybe. But what I meant is that they are not. They are. I mean, it sounds awful, but you know, the Turkish. You know what I mean? Like the Turkish population, it's kind of like the way America treats Puerto Ricans or Iran, you know, with Afghans. They offer them full citizenship, they offer them money for, you know, for mercenary work, basically. That's what's happening. So it fits Turkish apparatus modi, basically, the way they handle operations, right? But I mean, this it's narrow in my view to see it as Azeri Turkish people, so, you know, unifying around a cause or something like that. What is seems to be the bigger thing seems to be the part. I mean, this is part of Turkish changing policy, becoming a bit more aggressive, neo-Ottoman foreign policy, whatever it is. But yeah, Turkey is clashing with France and Europe in Libya, and Russia. Turkey is clashing with them in Lebanon. Turkey is clashing with them in Eastern Mediterranean, as we covered over the gas issues. And now this is another front opened up, which it was quite interesting that when Turkey started fully supporting Azerbaijan, there are even reports that there are Turkish jets, although again Turkey denies all of that. Turkey says it's just moral support. You had Macron come out, and Macron said these type of the talks, especially for a country that is part of the Minsk group, is extremely worrying. It's warlike talk. So Macron is again taking the lead in the European sort of a stance against Turkish ambitions. But while France is, I mean, they have a massive Armenian diaspora, so that's a big deal. They don't want Turkish expansion. They are very anti-Erdogan right now. But I don't think France is as important of a player. When it comes down to it, it's Russia that Turkey is really engaging in this conflict, and is the one with real interest in that. Russia, again, very complicated. Russia is closer to Armenia for sure. Russia has been selling weapons and arms to both sides, but they are closer to Armenia culturally and politically. Um, in terms of Azerbaijan, possibly because of oil, possibly because of Aliyev's corrupt practices, has moved closer to U.S. You had even during Obama years, before Brzezinski died. You know, Brzezinski was a guy. Brzezinski was national security advisor to Jimmy Carter. He actually played the role in Iranian revolution and all that. And a lot of people call for Obama's foreign policy Brzezinski's foreign policy. He was Obama's godfather in some ways. And he apparently went to Azerbaijan. There are major Mike Pompeo. There are major connections with American oil industry or American elite in Azerbaijan. So, Azerbaijan is rich, so they have managed to basically get more Russian support in recent years. But since July, since there was the conflict, a bit of a flare up, Armenia has increased its purchases of arms from Russia as well, and it is generally closer to Russia because of, uh, I mean, strategically speaking, Azerbaijan is more on the western side. But Russia is very wary. Russia does not want to make Azerbaijan another Georgia that is just basically goes full on to the western side and becomes enemy of Russia. So, and Russia is very much aware that Azerbaijan is not embracing the West in the same way that Georgia was. Like, allowing the Western companies to come in, take over everything and all that. And in fact, you're seeing Azerbaijan kind of embracing Russia. They call it Russification, if I'm not mistaken. The idea that Russian language is taught in their schools, Russian language is still, tolerated in Azerbaijan, that type of thing. Because some Soviet countries, they go through like Ukraine is going through a process of just trying to get rid of everything Russian. So why? And I believe Russia has a security cooperation deal with a few Soviet countries. I forget the name of this specific security deal, and that includes Armenia, but Azerbaijan is not part of that. So in terms of defense and military cooperation, Armenia and Russia are closer, far closer. And legally, probably Russia has to intervene on the side of Armenia if it comes down to it in the end. But again, it's it doesn't want to make an enemy of Azerbaijan. It doesn't want to push it towards the West. So they've been very cautious. They've called for ceasefire. But from what I was seeing from RT, the Russian funded channel and stuff, you do get the feel that the Russian population and the Russian cultural support or moral support is definitely going more for Armenia than Azerbaijan. And from what I understand, this may be mistaken, but this is not a this is not something I embrace or I support or anything. But generally speaking, Armenian population are in Russia are more associated with arts, with culture, with architecture, look kind of like Georgian people, while Azeri people, sadly, they are more associated with criminal gangs in Moscow because there are powerful Azeri criminal groups. It's common knowledge they are active as far as Ukraine or other countries. So it's just this is not that to say majority of one group of people are like that or the other. I'm just saying this seems to be the general mindset, general thing average person has about these two ethnic groups. Yeah, so that's the Russian side. This is the Russian. So and Turkey and Russia have had Turkey, Russia, and Iran have been fighting over this region for the last 500-600 years at least. You know, yeah, it's so Russia. Yeah. So no, just wanted to say connecting it to France, while France and EU are, pushing against Erdogan at this moment, probably more aggressively even than Russia. The real game is between Turkey, Russia, and maybe to a lesser extent Iran. And and by the way, this is definitely part of. I mean, let's not forget this is all happening largely because America is pulling back. When America was the strong, the superpower of the world, all these conflicts were simmering there. Everybody now, it seems seems to be the trend with a lot of news we cover. All the America is retreating. Just maybe they don't care. Maybe they're forced to retreat. Whatever. And all these old conflicts, all these old wars are, uh, coming back up.
Yeah, that seems to be a common point in many of these stories that we've covered recently. But okay, so I know you were telling me earlier on that you had some kind of, let's say, hot, unusual take to add on this conflict. But before that, so you mentioned that slightly unrelated to the story, but just in 1 minute, tell us why there are so many Armenians in France and why there's such a big Armenia diaspora.
Yeah, sure. Let me give you a bit of a, yeah, I'll cover the Iran thing in this segment as well. So, uh, of, I mean, to be honest, Armenian people have always been around, they've always traveled all around the world, but historical Armenia is not where Armenia is right now. It includes that, but it should include pretty much historical Armenia, which is an ancient country. Like we are talking ancient, we are talking Egypt old, like that's ancient, right? It includes pretty much the east northern side of Turkey, Anatolia. That was called, this is all Greater Armenia. It's a massive, much bigger, more than twice its current size. And Armenian people were basically living there for majority of their time. But since ancient times, Armenia was always basically on the border with the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. So it was always Armenia, and then you had the Syria. It's fascinating that it's been 3,000 years, but really nothing has changed. Like you had the Persians and Romans fighting over it, then they get to a peace that the Persians appoint the king, and then Romans uh, do the coronation, sort of a balance of power situation. That guy's cousin comes in. It's really weird. So you always had a problem there. It was always a border thing, right? But then thousands of years pass. Turkish people come and conquer all these regions. They set up khaqanes, they set up vassal kingdoms, including Christian Armenian vassal kingdoms. I mean, Turkish people were not originally Muslim, and usually they were very tolerant of local populations' faith and culture and everything. Uh, so you have all of that, and then you have Armenians living in uh, uh, Turkish people get integrated in the local populations, and then you have Iran come out, sort of rising up on one side of like half of Armenia, and you have Ottoman Empire. And by Iran, I mean Safavid Iran, Qajar Iran, medieval Iran, right? You have medieval Iran, and then you have the medieval Ottoman. Now, both medieval Iran and medieval Ottomans, they're not at first at all, but increasingly they become religious. They become more and more religious in their ideology. From sort of secular tribal, they move to become more and more religious. And in case of Ottoman, Armenia becomes a sort of a question problem for them. There are a lot of records about Ottomans having meetings about the Armenian questions, how to deal with the Armenian question. That is partially as Ottomans they try to respond to the increased nationalism within Europe that is threatening the Balkan region, which is also a largely Christian region for them. So what they do, they start responding with their own version of nationalism, the Ottoman nationalism, the Turkic nationalism.
So in early
And that
20th
Turkic,
century, or it was this before that?
late, even before that, late 19th century and early 20th century. So you have these, what's his name? I believe, anyway, Adel Pasha, I forget the name of the person responsible for, but yeah, nationalism becomes a far more potent ideology within Turkey, and sadly, it leads to um, increased tensions with the Armenian population, and Armenian population gets scared. The Turkish, and it basically culminates in the Armenian genocide, which leads to the death of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Armenians when they are being moved around. And by the way, I like to point out that this is uh, because many people will say I'm probably unjustifyingly, I'm not giving the full account. It was a war. Yes, it was World War One. Yes, Armenians got certain supports from other foreign powers, but it does not justify the way they were treated by Turkish authorities, by Ottoman authorities. And I would like to point out even Kemal Ataturk, the most nationalistic, the father, Ataturk, father of Turks, he even he called it a fezahat, which, as you know, which means basically basically means a fucking mess. That's what it means. It means a fucking mess, and they did make a fucking mess of it, and they basically tried to clear all of Anatolia and all that region from Armenians, and that led to a massive displacement of Armenians, and there was always Armenians living as minorities in Ottoman, in Iran, and in Europe, but it further displaced them. And and you had, for example, Armenian Council voted in favor of joining the Persian constitutional revolution. So you had a major significant influx of Armenians into Iran, and major influx of Armenians into Russian regions, and and then later on the ones that could afford and were had connections to France, to America. You have a massive Armenian population in California. Um, for example, their famous David Dasmalchian is a famous Armenian American actor. And yeah, that's why you have large Armenian diaspora in France, in Iran, around the world, in America, because there was a genocide against them done by Ottoman authorities. I don't believe you should blame Turkish people for that, because in fact Turkish people suffered a lot from Ottoman policies during that time. It wasn't like they were having a great time.
Of
But
course, that's always the story.
I just like to, yeah, I just
That's
like to
always the
clarify
case
that.
everywhere. Yeah.
Connecting that to Iran, though, I would like to point out, because of historical reasons, Iranians have always been very tolerant of Armenians. Largely because, I mean, this goes back again to Safavid Iran, because the great king then, Shah Abbas, he, I mean, you have to because Iran is Shia, that ideology was, that is rooted in Safavid Iran. And Shia Iran always viewed Sunnis with more antagonism than Armenians and Jewish people. So
Armenians who are
Jewish and Armenian,
prominently they're Catholic, right?
they're not Catholic, they're Christian, they're Armenian Orthodox.
Oh,
Actually,
Armenian Orthodox. Yeah.
Armenians view themselves as the first Christian nation, and they might be. It's either Armenia or Ethiopia that is the first Christian nation, like as a state. And yeah, and to be honest, and they used to be, I mean, it's there is so much connection with Iranian old religion and all that. And yeah, so in Iran they were always actually not just tolerated, they have always occupied very much high, like during all of Safavid era, Qajar era, pretty much our middle class, the bureaucracy, not so middle class, sorry, the bureaucracy and significant portions of the middle class were always Jewish and Christian Armenians, and Jewish Iranians. You have all famously there like even not just like famously in Iran, most famous good butcher shops are Armenians. You know, music, they are very prominent. You cannot read about history of Iranian music and not read about Armenians. Uh, like it's pretty much it's Iranian cinema. It's Iranian culture is just tied so much to Armenian sort of culture. So Iran is very much involved in that, and Iranians have very nostalgic view of Caucasus, and they view that as a homeland they've lost. And the Iranian reaction has been fascinating, because Iran in 1990 supported Armenia in the war. Iran played a crucial role in providing energy and allowing food supplies go to Armenia during that war. Now, and largely it seems during the last 30 years, Iran has had closer relations with Armenia. This is partially due to the fact that Azerbaijani government has also, they have super nationalistic groups that has called for unification with what they call, which I'll get to that at the end actually after this segment, they call Southern Azerbaijan, referring to the Iranian, greater Iranian Azerbaijan, because Iranian Azerbaijan is actually 3 different provinces. So because of that, Iran is somewhat, it always tries to keeps Azerbaijan at a, at a bit of a distance because they're worried about nationalistic separatist movements in Iran. And they, like Russia, because they have an antagonistic relationship with America, and because they are, you have to remember, Iranians view Turkey as a, as a potential enemy. Maybe they are collaborating right now, but this is somebody they've had border dispute with for thousands of years, right? So at the same time, they don't want Azerbaijan and Turkey to become too strong. So they generally, economically, militaristically, strategically, are far, and culturally, as I mentioned, far closer to Armenia. But in this recent conflict, there was a bit of a surprise because you had 4 supreme leader in Iran uh, appoints the people who lead the Friday prayers in different cities. And this year, you had 4 of them, which are basically spokespeople for the supreme leader, because supreme leader in Iran is kind of like the queen in the UK. He doesn't do speeches, he doesn't do interviews. It's just he's a figurehead. Once a year for New Year, that type of thing. And he's, by the way, our supreme leader is from Azeri background, and he's an Azeri speaker. A supreme leader is actually a multilingual. He can speak Arabic, Azeri, and Farsi, and I believe some English. And they have supported Azerbaijani claim this time. They said Karabakh is an Azerbaijani land and it belongs to Azerbaijan. Let me give you some background though. Even though they have done that, there are reports which seem to have been confirmed that Iran is allowing um, equipment and food supply go from its land to Armenia, because we have border with Armenia. So again, still it seems Iran is strategically supporting Armenia. That's one thing. Secondly, even though Iran is worried about Azerbaijani and Turkish ambitions, in the 1990s, when there was the war, Iran actually negotiated a peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia called Tehran Communique, if I'm not mistaken. And both sides signed that deal. But a day after they signed that deal and Azerbaijanis sort of stopped their troops, Armenia did not follow through with that deal and continued to go on offensive. They actually took over 2, 3 more cities. And Iran quickly issued a statement saying they do not approve of this. This is a betrayal of the Tehran communique. During Rafsanjani years, the President Rafsanjani. And so Iran might be, bitter about that as well. And Iran has developed a stronger financial relationship with Baku and with Azerbaijan. So it's a mess of an international uh, with so many players for such a very small and partially, you can say, maybe insignificant region, but it is. And yeah, and the sad thing is, it has already seems to have some missiles have, or some Azeri missiles may have hit Iran, which is very sad. And I hope Iran takes a stronger position. Personally, this is my personal bias. I hope Iran takes a stronger position in favor of Armenia. This is a personal position. This is not analysis or anything. I just think it would be a shame. I don't know. I'm worried what would happen if we allow Azerbaijan to basically steamroll the whole, that region. It could be, we could see another very ethnic killings. I don't know. It's not going to be pretty. Maybe not. Maybe not. Hopefully not. But we'll see.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on the story. So far we know that Azerbaijan, no, Armenia has accepted the ceasefire, and we're waiting on Azerbaijan, right?
Yeah. That was the latest, like about 20 minutes ago. But it's, who knows?
All right, so we'll see what happens there.
Thank you, thank you. First, let me say it's not that I necessarily side with that. That was I was trying to be objective in that analysis, and I think it is in Iran's benefit for uh, not to allow like Iranian. That was like more from the point of view of a state, not me personally. But this one is my personal view, and it's more to do with history, to be honest, than this specific conflict. But I do think, because this kind of ties into the separatist movement in Iran. First of all, I would like to point out that Azerbaijan was a name of a Persian satrapy that was put in that place by Greeks, right? So the idea that, they talk about, like, Azerbaijan has always been part of Iran, has always been part of Iran, except like few years, maybe Ottomans took over or something. And Azerbaijan has always meant the region in Iran, in northeast Iran, that we call Azerbaijan. The area where the country Azerbaijan is has traditionally been called Irvan or Shirvan. And I believe that it's kind of that is these are all consequences of Stalin's trying to sow the seeds of discord, by because there is a good argument that Cold War actually starts in Iran. After World War II, Russian troops were stationed in northern Iran, and they weren't evacuating as promised. And then you have Iran actually making a complaint to the UN and to the US, and then US making a phone call. Apparently Truman makes a phone call to Stalin, giving him a stern warning, and then the Russians pull back from Iranian Azerbaijan, and the Soviets pull back, and since then on, I believe, like, Stalin has put these things that causes, if there is an ethnic conflict in Iran or in Turkey, then he can come in and takes over the land. So I do think Iran should take a much stronger stance, just like Greece took for many years with Macedonia. They shouldn't allow uh, a name that belongs to us to be used by other nations, in my view. And not that I don't believe, I believe people who live in Azerbaijan are Azeris. Of course they are. They speak the language, and all that. And I don't think they should be held responsible for crimes of a 6th generation or 7th generation ago or anything like that. It's just, I do think we should refer to places in their original historical name, and not uh, politicize them, and uh, not use it for political expansionist um, movements. But this is my personal view, of course. Very few agree with me on that. I think they probably, a lot of people would say I'm a bit too
Right,
hot on this issue.
this is a very common thing and tactic that happens, right? Whenever there's like changing the name of a place, in order to give some kind of different association to it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, no, it's been the case in there are a few disputes similar to
I
this
see.
one.
But I
And
don't think it's that of a big deal. So basically, you're saying the name Azerbaijan has historically referred to the region that falls within Iran right now, and the country that is called Azerbaijan right now has historically had a different name.
yes, and I believe and Azerbaijan has the idea that there was an independent Azerbaijan before the collapse of Soviet Union, because a lot of people are trying, in my view, to change history, to rewrite history, is not true. Azerbaijan, there were attempts at a Soviet-backed puppet regime in Azerbaijan, but Azerbaijan has always been an integral part of Iran. It's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like separating West, Midwest from America. It's just such a, the modern state of Iran, the Safavid state, originates in Ardabil, a major city in Azerbaijan, and Gilan, which is basically next to Azerbaijan. You know, the ancient Iran is actually rooted in the south. Like, a lot of people in the America in the West or whatever, they think of, Persia in the south, Persian Gulf and stuff. But the modern state of Iran is actually rooted in the north of Iran, in Azerbaijan, in Gilan. By the way, I have Azeri in my background. I believe majority of Iranians do. It's just Azeri and Persian have mixed so much. And even if you look at ancient times, Azerbaijan is the place of Medes, who are thought to be the ancestors to modern Kurds and Azeris, basically. So it's just, to me, this is Azerbaijan is a major part of Iran, and I don't appreciate people using the name to actually separate probably one of the most populous, one of the most important, one of the most historically significant areas Iran, because you have that every other year that Azerbaijan tries to basically, in my view, basically falsely take over our authors, take over our poets, people who have lived in Azerbaijan, but they wrote in Persian and Azeri. Some of them were Persian ethnically, some of them were Azeri, all of them were Iranian. Iranian refers to the umbrella group. They even identified some of them as Iranians. Some of them didn't. I accept that, but I don't like that. I don't appreciate it. It's like French people suddenly saying Shakespeare was French. He was a famous French author. Because like they take over UK and then he become. It doesn't work like that. You can't just steal somebody else's culture. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, and use it for political purposes when you want to have a sports competition. Put, other countries, architecture, other countries' poetry on your thing, other countries' name. You know, uh, just I find that very problematic and somewhat offensive, to be honest. So again, maybe I mean, to be honest, look, it is a personal thing, though. I understand there are hungry people. Cancer hasn't been cured. There are real issues we should focus on. But this is like a pet peeve, so I thought I'd point it out.
Ah, interesting. Good pet peeve. Very good, very good. Okay, so shall we now segue into our quick take section?
Sure, sure. I mean, I think let's start with you because I've just been talking a bit
Yeah.
too much.
I know.
Yeah, just
But you
yeah,
just had some,
yeah,
but you just added a new story to your list too, right? Which has to do with China and Iran. So we'll get to that and about oil. Okay, so just I saw this
yes.
story. It was widely covered by The Guardian and other places. So an investigation was carried out by Thomson Reuters Foundation and the New Humanitarian. The New Humanitarian is a media outlet that focuses on humanitarian affairs, and it is very well respected in the humanitarian sphere. So according to their investigation, about 50 women in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, so big country right in the middle of Africa, which is extremely rich in resources and also has had a lot of issues right now. So basically, 50 women have accused WHO staff members primarily, but also staff members from other NGOs of sexually abusing and exploiting them. So all of these accounts come from a city in the eastern side of Congo called Beni. And most of the conflicts that are going on in Congo right now, whether they're community based or other reasons, and as well as the Ebola crisis, they've all been limited to eastern Congo. Whereas, for instance, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo is all the way on the west. So most of the issues that you hear right now, where it has to do with the Ebola crisis or fighting and all this, is, from what I understand, mainly limited to the east, to eastern Congo. So yeah, this story has come out, and I would say it's not that shocking if you are kind of in the UN spheres. You always hear of, abuse of powers going on in various African nations. People who are working for UN and other international organizations have a lot of power in these countries. And these stories so far have been corroborated by local NGO members and also drivers. And in the story, they point out that there's probably a lot more than 50 women, but these are 50 women who have come out. So a little bit, and these women were basically cooks, cleaners, and even some of them outreach workers. So they worked for, I believe, some of these NGOs on short term. And one is even said to have been an Ebola survivor seeking psychological help. And at least two of them said that they've fallen pregnant from these sexual abuse and exploitation. So a little bit
Oh,
of, yeah.
wait. The people who are the people who are accusing WHO, sorry, they were themselves social workers and outreach
Some
workers.
of them, some of them. So it's saying right now, I'm reading from the article, it says these women were cooks, cleaners, and community outreach workers. So some of them maybe worked in their houses. If you're an international, if you're of an international background, so if you're not from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and you can apply this to every single country, and you're an international UN worker or WHO worker, that's when you get all the kind of perks that come with working in the humanitarian. So, you get a free house typically, your kids go to school for free, you get a car, you can get security depending on the setting, and then you can get drivers, you can get cooks, and a lot of things. And most of your salary will be as much as, let's say, you would get in a Western country. Not not the highest, but you can pretty much pocket most of that money. You don't have too many expenses. Your expenses are taken care of. But yeah, so this happened during the Ebola crisis between 2018 and 2020. DRC has pretty much had an Ebola crisis on the eastern side going on and off for the past, five, 10 years. And just I know a little bit about DRC's history. So DRC is extremely rich in resources. I don't know if it has oil and gas, but all those other kinds of mineral and all the resources that are used in batteries, whether it's lithium-based batteries for electric cars or in smartphones. So, it's just a country that is extremely rich in resources. It probably has the third or fourth biggest population in Africa. Its population is about 85 million. So maybe it has a smaller population than Nigeria, perhaps Ethiopia and South Africa maybe, but it's up there. And it has an interesting colonial history. So DRC was actually privately owned, and during this time it was called, ironically, I think, I'm looking for the name, the Free State of Congo. Some kind of ironic name like this, but it was the private property of King Leopold II of Belgium until the early 1900s, when under pressure, I'm not sure from where, but the Belgian parliament pretty much decided to officially take over the country. So it had a terrible colonial root. I was reading something that they of course prevented locals to go and receive education and all this. So once the Belgians officially pulled out in the 1960s, they left the country in disarray, and we can still see how it's being impacted ever since. But yeah, this was just another story that came out. If you remember, yeah.
I just wanted to, as a historical background, from what I recall, history books and stuff. Generally speaking, between all the empires, and we are talking about different degrees of awful, really awful. But the Belgian Congo experience was pretty much uniformly described as the worst imperial management ever. Like even within, like at the time, it was criticized by other imperial powers. That and German imperial actions within Africa are usually referred to as the worst of the worst. I believe 1/3 of the population died during that time. And if you look at the origins of the disease that we live in with now, HIV, most people believe HIV came about because of the disgusting way that Congo was managed in terms of like constant rape and just the level of, I mean, it's very scientific. I don't even understand it. It's medical science, but it was just such a badly managed thing that it even led to creation of new viruses that they live with us to this day and kill many people and cause suffering a lot. So, you can see how these imperial things are still affecting us today. It was gruesome. By any standards, it was awful.
No, 100%. I've read similar accounts. And now that you mentioned this, it just reminded me of something. Sometimes people think, oh, this country is not colonized anymore, or blah, blah isn't this. And as if like all the consequences of whatever happened in the past, are just like, they go away like this. It's as if like you don't let a kid go to school until the age of 11, and then at the age of 12 he goes to school and he can't read or write and he's far behind, and you're like, listen, I let you go to school, now you're going to school, why can't you, blah blah. But yeah, I've also read that the
Yeah, you had
accounts.
1 year.
Yeah.
Oh, if, if I'm not mistaken, there is a, what's that? That's Congo as well. They had a famous politician who was an independent fighter after they became independent, and he gave a very courageous. His name escapes my head. There are many streets around the world named after him. Courageous speaker. He gave a speech in front of the King of Belgium. I don't know if it was King Leopold or the next one, about how we are not, this now we are independent and we are not gonna, allow you to exploit us anymore. This is after independence, and I believe CIA and the Belgium's intelligence services, within a week they had him killed in the most
Oh,
gruesome manner you can imagine. And
wow.
yeah, so it's not even, colonialism didn't end with end of
Yeah.
empires.
Yeah, and I mean Congo, like I said, it's still struggling with Ebola, and there's a lot of. I know that in the Democratic Republic of Congo in the east, there's a lot of there's a lack of trust in whether something that these humanitarian workers are the ones who are bringing Ebola, whether it's even local ones. It's not all ran by foreigners, like, and I don't want to make it seem like the UN isn't doing anything there that is legitimate, but there's complete mistrust. I can just imagine the balance of power in the Congo just being ridiculous. And so the UN and WHO have come out, they've put out an official press release saying, even Gutierrez, the UN chief, has come out and said that, we're going to investigate this. Although they had a word in there I didn't really like. They said that, not, and this was from the press release from WHO and others, they're like, we're going to investigate into people claiming that they're associated with WHO. So they're saying, maybe some of these people said that they were working for WHO, but in fact, they were not. But an official investigation is supposed to be launched, and it's a shocking and sad story. But for anybody who's worked at the UN, I'm sure they've heard a lot of similar stories based on imbalances of power that really exist between the local population and people working for the UN and WHO.
No, no, yeah.
And
I
of
would like
course,
to
everybody. Sorry, I
point
was just gonna say, and of course, everybody remembers Oxfam was hit by a giant scandal that had to do with exactly this. But it wasn't limited to one country.
wasn't that more, I thought that was underage as
That
well.
was prostitution and
In this case,
sexual exploitation and
oh.
yeah. So maybe yeah.
But I just brought it up. The name of the Congolese politician was Patrice Lumumba. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but he's very famous. I highly recommend reading about him. Very brave man who yeah, was basically probably killed by CIA and Belgian intelligence services. But I would like also to point out that in Africa, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, there is like people don't trust these organizations because of there are historical reasons for that, and these type of things help with the mistrust and help with the conspiracy theories.
100%.
So that's very bad. Yeah.
100%. So let's stay in the kind of NGO world. So Amnesty has been Amnesty International has pretty much been kicked out of India, right? That's how you put it. So they've frozen their bank accounts, right? Do you want to give us a little summary about this story and your take?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, to be honest, I didn't dive as deeply into that as other issues because of time. But yeah, Amnesty International is, yeah, I messaged you it, they're kicking out Amnesty, but the reality is Amnesty is leaving India because all its bank accounts have been frozen. And yeah, we had the recent ruling that in the courts that exonerated, basically acquitted, I don't know, the leaders of the Mondi's political party, BGDP, I forget the acronym, because when he was a governor of a state in India, there was an attack on a Babur era mosque, led to deaths, I believe, of more than 100 people, if not 1,000. And that was a major case within India, and the court just ruled that the leaders are not guilty. You had Amnesty International and other groups increasingly coming under pressure because of the Kashmir, because during the last couple of years, India has basically annexed Kashmir to its mainland. And Amnesty International, a lot of people are extremely worried about the situation there. Political parties from that region are being suppressed, and even for a very long time, internet connection was like it was a complete blackout in that region. And since then, Indian government has basically been cracking down on international organizations that it sees as problematic. And then you had the court ruling. Then you had also something which really shocked me. You had another disgusting case of rape, which sadly is too too common for just even one is too many. But it's just the level in India is somewhat shocking. I hope they get it somewhat under control. But yeah, and you had another case in which the victim, she was cremated against the wishes of her family, which is by the government, which all of these signal an increasingly nationalistic, increasingly, you know, a statist approach from the Indian government. And I don't know if it's all of this is necessary. It seems, yeah, they are really pushing forward with, I mean, the thing is, India's strong point was that it's freedoms because it's not like an economic, you know, it is an economic powerhouse now, but compared to what it could be, compared to what China is, it's been a failure. It's been a failure through and through. And I don't mean that I'm not exaggerating, it's been a failure. A nation with the level of education, with the level of talent, with the level of resources that they have, the government of India has continuously failed the Indian people. But the one good thing it had was that it allowed relative social freedoms, allowed relative political freedom, and it seems that's going away too. I hope at least that I hope this is if this is going to happen, at least maybe some economic growth, or I don't mean economic growth in a traditional sense. I mean a more balanced, you know, there are still 1 in 4 Indian people cannot read and write. 1 in 4. This is this is embarrassment for a nation of that power, of that talent, of that resources. So it is sad to see that India's focus seems to be more on these type of issues.
Yeah. And I think Amnesty
Yeah.
gets a lot of these kind of slack because Amnesty, unlike, it's not a humanitarian organization, it's like a human rights organization. So anything that it does and says, it usually gets, direct backlash from the government. So yeah, the government's official excuse is that, so apparently Amnesty gets a lot of funding externally, and apparently there's a law that prohibits NGOs in India from using funding that was raised externally. So apparently that is the government's official line of justification. And I think they had done something similar in 2016 and frozen their bank accounts.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, but I mean
Interesting. I had no
that's the
idea about the twist.
justification that's given. That's kind of the official justification. But it'll be interesting to see if they reopen their offices there. I think they also closed down their offices in Russia last year after not being able to work there anymore. And in Turkey, I think they were involved in long court battles even but I think they're still operational there and they're still working.
To be honest, I somewhat regret setting up this story with the amnesty as the because I kind of wanted to talk about the broader, update on India. And to be honest, I myself am generally highly suspicious of, not highly suspicious. I'm pretty much anti-charity in many ways. I don't believe in charitable organizations. I largely think they are mostly a propaganda thing. So, but I don't think in this case. I think in this very case, the situation in Kashmir and all that. So yeah, I kind of regret maybe the way I framed this topic in terms of like presenting my own. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that I do generally view these type of organizations like when you said they got kicked out of Russia. In my heart, I kind of was saying, yeah, good. So yeah, so I can be very biased.
Yeah, and I mean, we just talked about other issues that are rocking kind of humanitarian organizations worldwide. So they're not always just angels, just like everything in life. It's not black and white. And of course, I mean, you talk to a lot of people in these countries, they'll point out to, white savior complex, which not about the Indian amnesty one, but of course, helping out the poor Africans and, going there and, showing them the way that it's done. I heard, and people go there with the weirdest mentalities. This intern actually themselves talked about this. So I was interning at the UN organization, and this person had interned in, I think, in South Africa somewhere. So he had worked there a bit, and they were giving out school supplies to kids. And this person was like complaining. They're like, yeah, they're so, and this was taken out, so it didn't air. So I mean, sorry, it didn't feature publicly. But the person was complaining and saying like, yeah, we go there and like, there's a specific time that they can come and take, the pens and pencils and blah blah blah. But then they would come at other times and try to take, extra pens and pencils, so ungrateful and stuff. And I mean, just mind-boggling stories. You not only are you supposed to be there helping people, so it's troubling that you have this mentality, but on top of that, you're dealing with kids. Even if like Donald Trump's son, his younger one comes and takes something like that, it's not big of a story. You're dealing with kids. But yeah.
So I think our next quick take is our compulsory weekly Corona update news segment and studies related to that. I think you had the update about the Operation Warp Speed, which, to be honest, I don't even remember what it was or which country it was doing it or anything. So yeah, please let us know.
Yeah, so I just have two or three small vaccine stories. None of them are really based on scientific studies this time. But yeah, Operation Warp Speed, and it's a small news about it. But what is Operation Warp Speed? Operation Warp Speed is pretty much this operation that the US government has put in place where they are already manufacturing in advance the 4 or 5 vaccine candidates that they've put their trust and faith in. So, the ones that you hear of, the Moderna one, the Johnson one. So the hope is that they already started producing it. So once these phase 3 trial results come in, if they happen to be good and everything is okay and you get the go ahead, then you don't have to start worrying about manufacturing these and the logistics of the distribution. So this Operation Warp Speed is pretty much in place, which will of course most likely lead to a lot of waste in terms financial waste. But I mean, in this world where we waste money on absolutely everything and anything, I don't think that's a big concern. So technically speaking, a lot of these vaccines that will be manufactured, they're probably going to have to be chucked away. So that's what Operation Warp Speed is. And NPR just had a small story, which is that apparently the money, Operation Warp Speed, and by the US government, they've given $6 billion already to some of these vaccine candidates, but they're going through intermediary non-governmental organizations. So this was reported that Operation Warp Speed's funding has been routed through an intermediary non-governmental firm, therefore avoiding the usual requirements for regulatory oversight and transparency that accompany federal contracting as well as many public records request requirements. So I'm not too sure why they're doing that. Apparently the sum here is 6 billion. So 6 billion has been given to these 4 or 5 big pharmaceutical companies that are leading the vaccine quest in the United States. So I'm guessing more money, I was thinking, is probably given through other channels. But this was just a little update, and you rarely hear about Operation Warp Speed in the news. So it was more that it caught my attention that, okay, now there's some news on it, because it's not talked about, and I don't know why. Even during the elections, during elections, Trump said that vaccines will be ready in a few weeks, which is a total lie. We'll talk about that later. But I'm surprised that they don't talk about this Operation Warp Speed. It sounds like it doesn't sound so crazy to me. It's not a bad thing, and most countries are carrying out similar things, and it's good for Trump. He can be like, I have everything, the infrastructure in place. I'm just waiting for the right results to come in and for us to get the go ahead, and then we'll have these vaccines ready. But I still don't know why they don't talk about this. So then my second vaccine story is that European regulators are set to start an accelerated review of the COVID-19 vaccine frontrunner from the University of Oxford and AstraZeneca, the company. So the the trial that was actually stopped for about a week because of one of the participants developed a very severe spine-related adverse effect, but which has resumed ever since. There are trials all over the world except in the US. They have still yet to get the go-ahead from the FDA. So it's unclear what that reason is. It could be political, because at the end of the day, this vaccine, the credits will go to the British and to Oxford. So maybe it's not that big of a priority for them, and they have other candidates. But the Europeans want to, they want to start the review and speed up that. So that could be some concern for people who wonder, whether the correct steps are being taken to make sure that the vaccines will not be dangerous. Now, Russia, they're continuing with their trial from their vaccine that was the first to be registered, and they've also developed a second vaccine that has gone through the early stages of human trials. So it's already been given to more than a dozen people. So the Russians also have a second vaccine coming in. I thought they were going to put all their eggs in one basket, and if the trials don't go well with this vaccine, just change it a bit and continue the trials. But I think they're developing a second candidate. And now the last update that I have, it's kind of scary a little bit. So CNBC did a little bit of investigative reporting, and they talked to some of the participants who are part of the Moderna vaccine trial. And one of them actually came out and gave his name and everything, but 4 other ones remain anonymous. And they all talked about the side effects that they had from this. So this 4 or 5 people, so who knows? So some people might have had 0 side effects, but the ones that seem to be common is that for at least 12 to 24 hours, they felt pretty crappy. Headaches were very common, and waking up in the middle of the night and shivering and shaking is very common, having to take headache pills for migraine. And apparently it's the second, so the Moderna one apparently comes with 2 doses, and it's apparently the second dose. And the person who is not anonymous in the story, he recommends, either him or one of them is anonymous, he recommends to take the next day off from work. So it's like, if you're getting vaccinated, make sure to take the next day off. But because apparently one of the people who was reporting this story, he even chipped his tooth because he was shaking so much when he woke up after the second dosage in the middle of the night. But apparently after 12 to 24 hours, they've all felt okay. So of course, the adverse effects for at least these 4 or 5 people who have come forward have been nothing like the one where they had to stop the Oxford vaccine trial. But I think it shows that, because when you take vaccines, they always say that, some you don't even feel anything that day, some have like a longer impact on you. But this seems like so far we're on the road that when there is a vaccine, at least the Moderna one, a lot of people are going to feel, some relatively serious adverse effects during the first day of receiving the second dose. So we'll put the link to the article below if everybody wants to read their accounts themselves. They're a bit scary. The person who came out, the person who didn't stay anonymous, he said that, okay, listen, I did experience these for half a day, but I think that it's worth it. So that was his takeaway.
No,
But those are my vaccine updates. And then I have a little bit more of a vaccine update, but I'm going to leave that for our US selection related story. So I wanted to throw it back to you now, unless you had anything you wanted to add or any questions, for you to give us a.
No,
Uh,
I would just say that I guess the reason why probably they don't talk about it in elections so much is because it's not as eye-grabbing, like to talk about that we have the infrastructure ready and all that. You know what I
it
mean?
doesn't. No, it sounds reassuring to me, especially from Trump, because Trump can be like, let's say if a week before the elections, the vaccine gets the go ahead, he can be like, hey, and as I've been saying with Operation Warp Speed, we've been thinking ahead, and we're ready to start distributing these vaccines at a
He kind
large
of
scale.
he kind of already is saying that. I mean, we get to
Yeah,
the debate later on, but even in the debate, there was a segment that, yeah, that Chris Wallace was saying, you're head of blah blah, and head of blah blah says that it won't be ready by then,
yeah,
but you're basically saying it will be.
yeah,
Well, we'll get into
yeah. We'll
it, but
get to
I
that.
just that's that.
So give us the Assange update first, because I'm curious myself. How's it going? So his trials have resumed for a few weeks now in London.
Yeah, yeah, it has, and they have used the coronavirus as a way to basically limit as much possible as the journalists covering the thing. Not that, to be honest, there are great interests in. I mean, what's happening with Assange, and the reason why I try to include something about him every week is because I find it to be very disgusting, especially the way Guardian is treating this news. Guardian is the newspaper that basically built its international reputation based on WikiLeaks. Based
WikiLeaks
on
and then
presenting
Snowden.
WikiLeaks. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Snowden did. I believe Snowden was. I don't know if Snowden was helped by WikiLeaks as well or not. I don't remember.
But
Or they
the
played. I think they
Guardian
played a.
were yeah, but the Guardian were fully much involved. I mean, it's Glenn Greenwald who
Yeah,
was working for the Guardian back then who broke the story. So just kind of in that tradition of what you're saying.
I. I don't. Think I don't think Glenn Greenwald ever worked for Guardian. He
No, I
always collaborated with
okay,
them,
yeah.
so to speak. But yeah, but it's disgusting the way they're ignoring this news story. And to be honest, I am trying to make a effort on not going on the Guardian website anymore, genuinely because of this, because I find them to be so disgusting. During the last few months, the only thing they did have an opinion piece about by this by this. I'm sorry to I'm gonna be a bit of a by this person who I don't believe is a real like some idiot. Frankly, she's just some woke, political correct, anyway, tribalist idiot who wrote about the fact that Assange was, accused of sexual harassment in Sweden, charges that were dropped by the person herself as well as by the Swedish authorities. Charges where there, I mean, you have to be a child to not see the political motives behind those charges. You have to be a real child that never really done anything or read anything about politics.
And not a very good
And
analyst if you can't separate issues in such a way,
yeah,
separate
yeah,
his work
exactly.
and these accusations, even if such accusations happen to be true, it has nothing to do with this, you don't go to court and you're not just judged on like, although sometimes they do judge you on your character and all that, but it's not like a overall thing of rating you, there's specific charges based
Yeah,
on
yeah. And
specific
and
way.
yeah, let's not forget these are
Yeah.
accusations. He's not been proven guilty or anything like that.
Which legally
And
speaking have been
there
dropped
was
and they're over. I mean, that story is closed.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. It was in my view, it was not a real story to begin
Yeah.
with, but that's maybe I'm a
But they,
conspiracy
they really
theorist. Oh,
destroyed his
maybe
reputation with
you know
that.
I am such a yeah, I'm such a conspiracy theorist. I think maybe CIA has covert operations. Wow, what a shocking uh, thing to believe in. Anyway, but apparently there was the most recent hearing that there was a there was I've heard that on Useful Idiots, by the way, podcast as well as I believe the Gray Zone videos. I saw the journalist to come in, but there somebody testified about the fact that the U.S. intelligence services were, apparently, or their contractors, were even considering poisoning Assange when he was in the embassy. I believe now we know that they spied on him the whole time, including when in his bathroom, um, and they spied on his family. They stole his children's diapers for DNA. I mean, besides, let's just the fact that these people, I mean, I love that when evil and stupid come together. It's just the combination is just great. Yeah, these evil bastards. They stole his children's diapers in hope of finding DNA um, in their feces, I suppose. And by the way, I would have thought maybe you can find DNA in the feces, but you are fucking CIA. You are organization. You can have scientists tell you. Apparently, you can't. You can't get DNA from
No way.
feces. So I didn't know.
That's
But
hilarious.
just show the level of incompetence, the level of corruption, the level of like how far these assholes are willing to go when somebody opposes them.
Yeah.
And the idea of free speech and all this bullshit they espouse. Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness, so we turned off the lights, I suppose. It's easier.
Jesus
Democracy dies in
Christ.
darkness. Kill the lights. You know?
Yo, this is why this word democracy, I can't stand it anymore, but anyway.
Yeah, it's and yeah. I mean, there is my update is basically increase. We know some more awful shit
Yeah.
added to Assange. It's not much of an update. I just like to have once a week. I like to talk about him. Not that we don't have that many subscribers. We don't have that many viewers or anything. But whatever,
Yeah.
you do what you can.
And we did a longer
Every
segment
little
of
helps.
this from about 2 or 3 weeks ago when the trials resumed in London. So we'll link to that in the description box below, so you can check that as well if you're interested. And
And
of course,
I genuinely don't know what I can or any normal person can do to help this situation or help him in
Yeah.
any way. But I wish we could, if somebody knows in any way we can sign a fucking petition.
yeah.
None of this will do anything.
Yeah. So apparently now
Whatever.
what's going to
I mean, it's
happen is
sad.
that they're going to, I mean, both sides are supposed to be presenting their cases, and then the British jury will go and deliberate for a few months, and then they will say whether Assange can be extradited to the United States and, I guess, face God knows what. All right. So let's try.
And as we covered, the judge is very likely to convict Assange, but it probably go to appeal. It's going to be another 5 years of jail for him at least.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm actually curious to hear this. So you just added a new story before we wrap it up with the elections, and that has to do with Iran, China, and good old oil.
Yeah, this just came in. One of my my top researchers sent this to me. My father.
Our team of underpaid interns.
Yeah, underpaid. I don't pay them at all. In fact, I think sometimes they pay me. But yeah. But it seems interesting. I thought oilprice.com is not a bad website. I usually check it for oil prices. I don't read their articles, but I think, I mean, I found them to be, at least on oil prices, to be a reliable source. And they just had this article. It's from 30th of September that let me just read certain segments from it. With the 25-year deal with China now moving ahead at a pace, Iran has a buyer for all of the crude oil it can produce at a discounted level, obviously. So Tehran is pushing oil field development across the board. Iran is always the biggest problem Iran has had during the last 20 years, especially following the war, was the lack of funding for development of, I believe they're called brownfield oils or something, development or like new technologies, oil development, obviously because of the antagonism between Iran and US and all that. This includes not only major oil fields, uh, but also in certain areas, China has also pledged to increase collective output by at least 500,000 barrels per day within the next 2 years, which is very significant, very significant. And there are also operations and projects that Iran and China are gonna collaborate in Iraq, in Iraqi oil fields. And let me just say, as as an Iranian, obviously I am happy whenever Iranian economy improves, whenever there is a positive development there. But at the same time, I am extremely anti-oil, as I think oil has been the the underlying cause of lack of progress in certain economic areas in Iran. It causes, I think, what economists call the Dutch disease, and it's extremely bad for the environment. The process of exploration, the process of extraction, all of it is awful for the environment.
And everybody, of
So
course, knows about
I
the
really
emissions and climate change.
yes, yes, emission. Oh, yeah, yeah. We might. I mean, to be. I'm generally. Should have a big discussion about that. Max Blumenthal was on Katie Halber's show on YouTube, and he referred to a news you covered about the car petrol ban in California and all that. And I do think, yeah, yeah, we just people tend to not have a. You should. Everybody should have a very holistic view of it. Just climate change is the crucial, but at the same time, natural destruction of natural resources, destruction of natural beauty, acidification of oceans, and all of that. But yeah, it's in a way that's this. I mean, in a way, Iran is in a very bad economic situation. People are very poor. Of course, I want money to flood into the country just to deal with the emergencies we have right now. You see, there are reports in Iran of children, going through garbage. It's not a it's not a rare sight, from what I understand, and that's the immediate issue. Of course, that's the immediate issue. But I hope that this China-Iran deal will come to a more. I hope new technology. China is a leader in solar energy. Oh, China! This is something we covered. We covered. It's a 20. It seems to be most of it. The details is in secret. Nobody's seen, but it's a 25-year deal that promises Chinese, I believe, more than 400 billion of dollars of Chinese investment in Iran, mostly in oil industry, in port industry, and will allow China to have certain military people, not military installations, military troops, whatever. I believe up to like 3,000 or something in Iranian ports, possibly. It's a somewhat more significant deal than the one China had with Pakistan or certain Eastern European countries, because it even includes it includes promise, or I don't know, at least the bullet print for operational for agreements in Iraq for doing stuff in a third country. So like joint investment plans, that type of thing. And the key part of it is oil industry and the port industry and technology industry. China is providing right now Iran with 5G infrastructure and that type of thing. And it was a huge boost to the Iranian regime internationally, although it was opposed by a lot of Iranian nationalists in Iran who are very suspicious of China. And it's just, by the way, it's been just signed. Uh, Nobody knows in reality if it's gonna lead, you know. But yeah, it seems the more details are coming and it's moving forward quite strongly. And the news that Iran is going ahead with its development in oil fields is probably a sign that it's going ahead. This deal is becoming more and more serious. But again, China is a leader in solar energy. I think Iran could easily maybe not shift the focus. I understand oil industry is so big, so powerful, but maybe a start to shift the focus or something. Just,
I mean, it seems
and
like this shift of focus, like the whole transition from oil to solar. I mean, this is how life is. Things take a long time, but this shift, I feel like it's still stuck in first gear for the past like 25 years.
since I was born,
Yeah.
pretty much. Although I would say that's why I kind of referenced the Max Blumenthal appearance on Katie Halper show, and I'm gonna reference the Michael Moore documentary, A Planet of the Humans. I don't think even I'm not generally speaking, I'm not in the camp that I don't believe alternative technologies can save us really. I genuinely believe less consumption or less population is the key. But who
Yeah,
knows?
I fall more on
Hopefully.
the less consumption side, but yeah. Okay, let's not open that black box again. Okay, but let's have a little bit of fun. Let's talk about the
Yeah, yeah.
US election, or really the debate that were that shit show. I mean, the next
Let,
morning I saw, yeah.
let's start with the fact that just then Trump got corona. We were just recording this when we heard that.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say. There's not much to say.
Yeah,
Just, his
yeah.
wife got
Just
it too, apparently. They've both tested positive, and, hopefully they'll be good by Tuesday, and hopefully at least this will wake up some people, some parts of his base or others, who think this is a hoax, who don't take this seriously. So hopefully some good will come out of this story that everybody would want to say it's unfortunate, but I'm sure a lot of people are just dying to say
yeah. So,
but yeah.
when did you watch the debate?
No, so I saw clips here and there, and the first thing that I saw was the next morning on Instagram. I just saw a clip from CNN, and two of their usual blah 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 analysts, and their take was just so funny. They're just like, "This is a shit show," and it was. And I just don't think this is why I wasn't too excited about even someone like Joe Rogan moderating these debates. You can't moderate these two. I mean, Trump, the only thing he can do is this. It's not like he can actually adopt another approach right now. All he can do is shout and talk crap and bite nose a
I
bit.
don't know.
So the only way is if there's a third person who knows a lot and just shouts back at them. You know, that's why I don't feel like it makes any difference who's moderating
I
these.
mean, uh, I think if you look at the 2016 debates, primary and presidential Trump, I think this time it was they made a
But
they made a
then he had things
conscious
to.
choice of going full aggressive, and I think it backfired
But
because
back then,
I mean
yes.
even
But then he had, because he wasn't president yet, so he had a few things that he can point to that were he could say
no no
the
but
Iraq war was this, I should have pulled that. Now he can't say this. You'd say
no
I
no
would do better economy now. So he has nothing left.
put the substance aside, his decision to I watched the whole debate, man, and it was genuinely. I mean, I think the mainstream media is always covering Trump in a negative way,
Yeah,
so you can't tell. But this time it was genuinely fucking annoying.
yeah.
You wouldn't let the guy finish one sentence, everything. And it was definitely, in my view, a choice to
It
go
was a
this
choice, but
aggressive.
what else could he do? Yeah, he could be a bit less aggressive, but that
No,
that
like the
wouldn't do.
primaries in 2016 or the debate in 2016, it's not like he wasn't aggressive then, but he wasn't like this. This was fucking,
Yeah.
it was so annoying, man.
But
It's
he
just
had
like
he
he
had
couldn't
other
let the guy.
tools available to him back then.
What tools?
Attacking each of them. Like, he's even having troubles attacking Biden on a personal level. He has yet to find something that sticks as much as the stuff that he said about whether it was Hillary or, Ted Cruz and all that.
That, yeah, that's about Hillary, though. That's about the luggage and the fact that Hillary was such a Biden doesn't come across as establishment person. When you saw Hillary, even the way she dressed,
Yeah.
it was like a space, it was like an alien, like that he's trying to fit
Yeah.
in with humans. Yes, I am human. I believe in human. It's
Biden,
like,
hey
okay,
man,
okay,
hey man.
but that's but even like I think he's Trump's personal attacks on Biden's son, which by the way not personal attacks. It's
Yeah,
Hunter Biden is a corrupt, he's a corrupt. He's been living off of his parents' name basically. Um, yeah, I just read a story from my dad, so maybe I'm yeah. Yeah, and I think his attacks would have been more, um, would have been, would have had better results if he was a bit calmer about them.
yeah. If you
Like,
calm
I
down a
think his
bit.
attack. Did you see the part where he mentioned Elizabeth Warren? He
No.
said if he told Joe Biden, "Oh man, that was fantastic. That was fantastic because he was being an asshole. Don't get me wrong, but it was great. It was great." He said if Pocahontas had dropped out a couple of days earlier, you wouldn't be here. Like he was talking about the fact that, and he should have stuck to those things. Just a strategic surgical strikes. Although I would qualify all of that with the fact that I don't think debates matter. I
Yeah,
don't think they change anybody's
yeah.
mind unless something awful happens. Most people don't watch these type of
But
things
it
unless
should
they're
change.
political
It should
junkies.
change people in the long term. I mean, it's easier said than done. But every election in the U.S. comes down to the same issues, and then it's all forgotten about. Are these debates any point
Oh,
useful or not? Oh, what should we do about the college electorate system? Blah blah blah. We should change it. And then as soon as the election is over, then
yeah.
all of this is over, and you come back to the same issues 4 years later.
I think you are somewhat, to be honest, painting a rosy picture in many ways because in this debate there was almost zero talk of policy, and in
Yeah.
this election campaign as a whole, there has almost been zero. Nobody's talking about
That's why there's no
electoral
point
college.
of.
Nobody's talking about.
No, they will like later on though when whether if like they lose to Trump because of that.
Oh, when they lose to Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
And then they'll forget
Yeah.
about it whereas January 2021 is when to put pressure on this issue so maybe there'll be some kind of change. But I mean that's the thing
You
you're
know,
saying there was no substance discussed. That's why I'm saying whether Joe Rogan moderated them or who like what do they have to
no,
say?
but
They
no, no,
have
no,
they don't
no.
have anything to say. They don't know
That's
anything.
no, that's where I disagree with you because if they did it in the format suggested by the Joe Rogan guest or whoever it was, first of all, they would have had Jamie as a
Okay, that's
fact
not a
check, and I
Joe
think he's.
Rogan moderate debate, but that's too wishful. That's of course nothing like that is going to happen.
No, no,
The only thing
they
that
said
could
4 hours.
possibly happen is that they put Joe Rogan in the same place as this moderator was.
No, no. All right, okay, yeah, of course, in that format, it would. I'm not a Joe Rogan fanboy.
Yeah,
I love his. I don't even love. I like his program. I think his program is structured perfectly, and it's perfectly inducive for a deep debate about issues. It's
yeah,
long. There is somebody doing not a fact check. Somebody just looking
yeah.
online, looking at consensus and stuff. And I don't think Joe Rogan would do what Chris Wallace does. I don't think Joe Rogan would do what any of them do. He does ask genuine questions. He doesn't ask bullshit questions, which are, by the way, I would say I was very shocked. I was quite shocked when Trump didn't, when he kind of, in my view, kind of gave a shout out to the right wing with
Yeah.
the Proud Boys, the standby.
And
But
that's one of the main takeaways.
I but that kind of shitty question, like, oh, do you support white supremacists or not? Or which in Trump's case, it turned out to not be a shitty question.
Yeah,
It turned out to be actual fucking gray area for him, you know.
yeah,
But Morgan's questions would have been far, I think, if, like, yeah, obviously, I don't, I think Jeremy Paxman, he's a great British interviewer. I, I would want him to do it in a format that he wants, not
yeah.
in this shitty
Yeah, I mean,
format.
if you're going to change the format and all that, but I mean, of course, this will,
Yeah.
it never happen.
But I would say, though, I mean, people are again saying this is the worst debate ever and all that. Yeah, but I mean, it was genuinely the worst debate
But
I've
and
ever
all
seen.
your,
But it's never been high quality. It's
no,
always been a shit show. It's always been, some assholes prepared statements
Yeah.
basically
But
reading
these
it
guys
out
are
loud
just
to pre.
even more incompetent than the usual guys when it comes to, discussing policies and all this. And that's why, I mean, although, like you said, the debates are not even that important, especially at least at the presidential level. But they should for sure not make any changes in rules based on these two chaps. Because, like, these guys are at the extreme of the issues that are out there, So, I mean, they shouldn't make.
Biden isn't.
Yeah, I mean, nobody is like, that kind of as old as him, or has like such like issues
No,
remembering
but
things and talking
I
about
he's
substance as Biden. So even in that sense, he's like,
but that
pushing it.
I don't know. He's the most non-offensive politician in many ways, I would say.
Yeah,
Um,
but we know Trump is
yeah,
definitely.
I
I don't
understand
think
what.
other people will be able to pull off a Trump. So I mean, changes should not be made
Mm,
based on these two guys.
no, I mean changes should not be made based on one
Yeah,
event at any rate. Like there should be a complete overhaul of the format, in my view. But I do know that there were plans to cut off the mics, but then the organization backed off of that. That the
yeah.
moderator will be able to cut off the mics, and then today Trump rejected that. Said I won't,
I don't like that
agree to.
idea either. I don't like the idea either. Because who knows
I don't.
how and when it's going to be applied later on to other candidates, and as you go down the food chain.
Yeah, fair enough. No, no, I understand. I understand that. But
And
at the same, yeah, again,
and it's
I wish,
possible to keep
to be
other
honest,
people quiet.
yeah. But it was, I mean, to be honest, I never had great hopes for this debate anyway, especially with Chris Wallace hosting, um, or moderating, sorry.
Yeah,
But uh, yeah, I mean, not that he could do any better job with Trump. Nobody could. But yeah, it was just a shit show, but it was funny. I let me give a shout out to again Katie Halper and Matt Taibbi. Katie Halper does a live viewing of these debates, and I couldn't watch the actual debate. I had to watch them to be honest because it's
yeah,
funny and they do a drinking game, like and yeah, if you guys actually want to watch the debate, I highly recommend watching it through her channel because otherwise it's the most boring and most frustrating thing. At least with them, you have a few laughs, and as
yeah,
we are approaching the fucking apocalypse, you want to have a few laughs, I suppose.
yeah. So going back to election, I just had two small things I'm reading here. I want to talk. One was again related to vaccine, so I'll just wrap it up quickly. Which is Trump said that vaccine will be ready in a matter of weeks, but then the Moderna CEO has come out and say that it will not be ready before the election, and he's even saying that distribution won't be ready until March. So that kind of even wraps up my previous vaccine stories. But then the other thing that I just wanted to mention is that I heard, early voting seems to have really taken on. It's like a totally different level this year. So apparently, up to this time now, during the last election, only 9,500 people, if I heard correctly, had handed in early votes by mail. And right now, apparently, we're about to reach 1 million people. And they
Wow.
don't count these. Apparently, they don't. Although these votes are coming in, apparently they count them last. So they're saying, and you know how it's usually like the Republicans are usually winning because of where they get their votes from, and the demographics. So in this case, it might be even further accentuated. And then if they count these early votes later, which will most likely more be towards Biden, because I mean, Trump is telling people not to vote early. He's pretty much saying not to vote. So it'll be interesting what dynamic this early voting will end up playing.
No, no, yeah, that's. I think I mentioned that a few episodes back. I thought I did, or maybe I just told you in one of our talks. There is a real chance of civil war in the U.S. this time around because you
I'm
have a
glad you
situation.
brought this up because I have an
Wait,
opinion on this.
wait. You have. All right. I'll let me outline my position. You have a real chance that on the voting day, Trump will win, and then as they start counting, because you're not in some states, not in all the states, in some states you are not allowed to count the mail-in votes before the day of the election, and in the next few days. slowly Biden will catch on, because obviously the Biden supporters are more likely to not vote in person because of coronavirus, and Biden seems to be more popular with the older people as well, which who are generally more likely to vote by May. And then, and the reason why I say there is a real chance, I don't mean by real chance, by the way, a 90% chance. I mean a 10% chance, a real chance, It's because of the American, the fact that in America there are more than 300 million pieces of weapons among the public. I believe there are more guns than individuals, if I'm not mistaken. And then you have all these Trump supporters talking about if Trump loses, it's civil war. And, tensions are being basically ratcheted up in very, very hard, fanatical corners of the Christian right in US, as well as left. I think there are, these people who are bringing down statues illegally, all these things. All of this is, when the rule of law breaks down, it just takes a spark for the whole thing to go off. I'm not saying, by the way, it's likely. Again, I'm not saying it's likely. I'm just saying there is a chance. There's a chance for a good deal of. Maybe it goes the way of Al Gore and Bush. It goes to the court and it gets sorted out. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the scenario that you outlined will be a pretty bad one. So if Biden can't, catch up on that same night at least, so if let's say it starts off Trump and then he catches up, that's one
Yeah,
scenario. But
exactly.
if it drags on for days, I mean, every single day that it drags on, that will give Trump. I think if it drags on for a few days, then what I'm saying now might not hold, because I mean that's going to give Trump a lot of ammunition if even if it drags on for a few days. But if it doesn't drag on for a few
And
days, yeah, go ahead. You wanna say?
go, go.
No, I was gonna say if
No, no,
it
mine
doesn't
is
drag on for a few days, I can easily see groups of individuals, chaos being starting one or two or three places in the States. However, it will never become more than that, and just these smaller ones I think will have to be squashed, is because Trump wouldn't have, I don't think he would have the backing of anybody in the quote unquote deep state. So all the people who work in the government no matter what, all the people who work in the military, even Republican or Democrat politicians, even Republican politicians. I don't see it being as a value for them to taking such a big hit and just not going with the flow. It's just 4 years, you can win more Senate seats, you can win more Congress seats, rather than doing something that will be very abnormal in the US context. So just because I don't think he can have the support of anybody except pockets of the population, I don't think it's going to turn out being anything more than some very unfortunate events happening in different states and in different cities, but it staying at that level and eventually dying off. So you get the one main thing that I
uh,
think is key here, right? Is that I don't think he will have the backing of any institutional figures and powers.
that's I don't necessarily agree with you there, because he has strong connections with, for example, Betsy DeVos and Eric Prince, siblings from their famous and super rich DeVos family, super hardcore Christians, super hardcore involved with privatization of American military. So he does have those. He's not a favorite of deep state, but I do think if something like that happens, the deep state might look at it as an opportunity to fully have him basically become their puppet fully in terms of wars abroad. That's one thing. Secondly, internally, he has many loyal followers, many powerful loyal followers who are armed. That's the thing that makes America different from other nations in terms of they are right in a way. They say we need the guns against tyranny. In a way, not that they're right. I mean, American government has tanks. It's a joke. But at the same time, though, when you're talking about cities, when you talk about urban warfare, when you talk about taking over town halls, all of this is possible in the US. It has happened within the last decade many times, you know. So again, I don't think it's likely
I
at
think it
all,
just has to
but
do with the definition of
and
what a
and to
civil
be
war
and to be
could
honest,
be or something like that. As he's saying, I can see pockets, although I don't see too much how like such even powerful billionaires like the families
And
that you mentioned, because Biden on the other hand also has more billionaires and rich people on his side.
oh, but look, there is a difference. Silicon Valley billionaires are not the same as arms dealers, you know? They might be even richer. Bill Gates is richer than Sheldon Adelson, but Sheldon Adelson has connections. He has casino. He has a Jewish lobby in his pocket, you know? Uh, Not Jewish, sorry, Zionist uh, lobby, whatever. So, I do think it's not quite that clear cut. But one other thing I would say, I definitely, the problem is that it's gonna drag on. Biden is gonna lose the night, and it's gonna drag on, and that's gonna cause a lot of people to think the voting has been tampered with because the results are coming
You
in
don't think
slowly,
there's a
slowly.
chance that he could win that night, though? You don't think there's? I haven't ruled that out.
Biden, Biden, maybe,
Like
maybe. I
Obama
don't.
won.
To be
Obama won on that night, right? I remember he was kind of a bit neck
no,
and
but
neck with Romney, and
at
then
pretty much everybody who has won at that night, but you never had this much early voting. You never had
yeah,
coronavirus. That's the thing. That's the thing that is making everybody worried that you're gonna have 5 days. In that 5 days, Trump is gonna be as soon as the first results are announced, Trump is gonna be like, I'm the winner
yeah.
if he's on top. So he's gonna basically ratchet up his base and give them some time to really, it's gonna become it could become a shit show. I might not. I do think Trump's hope is that he can just not get elected and go and set up his own TV and rant about shit. But it's possible. It's
Yeah,
possible for
I
sure.
easily see it becoming a small shit show, but I think turning into a huge one. That I'm a bit more
Oh,
worried.
I'm sorry, but the small shit show was the debate we saw 2 days ago. That's the small shit. This is gonna be a mess.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I'm gonna say something else. uh, Again, Democrats and their tactics and their strategy is what's driving us to this place in America, because they are the ones from the time of Hillary Clinton that they started with the fact that oh, Trump is undermining our election, is undermining our pure and there has, by the way, go read about John F. Kennedy's election. It was completely corrupt. Like, election rigging in US is as common as anywhere, as any third world country, because it is largely a post-colonial third world country. But John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, all of them, Kerry, even John Kerry, there were 400,000 votes missing in Ohio, Iowa, somewhere like that. So it's like rigging election in US is common practice. And then they started with, oh, he's undermining our elections and stuff. And then the Russia gate, and saying that elections can be manipulated by foreign powers. And in a way, I'm happy that Trump is throwing it back in their face in a way, because if it's an act of political mudslinging, he's the best at mudslinging. And now look at now, he's undermining the whole mail-in system. He's undermining he's forcing millions of people to possibly put themselves in danger and going to crowded places to vote. And and this is all goes back to Democrats, their idiotic strategy, their idiotic tactics, their finger pointing, uh, and their hypocrisy, in my view.
no, I mean the strategy completely was failed, and everything I just saw, I agree 100%. Until when they had the turnaround with Biden. Since then, they've been shooting themselves less in the foot.
What do you mean? Since when?
Since they got behind Biden, and the way they like they spotted
Oh,
Biden's weaknesses. They were like, let's keep this guy as quiet as possible, and just had the same steady strategy for
man.
6 or
Yeah,
7 months.
I yeah, I think Corona was a godsend to the
Yeah,
Democratic Party, to be honest, both economically and, as you
100%.
said, the fact that now we can keep Biden quiet.
Yeah,
And the third thing, it distracted them from RussiaGate, that bullshit
yeah.
and
Exactly.
which seemed to be their main point of attack.
Yeah. Which wasn't going absolutely anywhere.
No, in fact, I mean, there was, by the way, another update was that finally Trump's tax returns got leaked to New York Times or somewhere, and again there were no there were proven there was no Russian contact, there was no undisclosed Russian money coming,
Yeah.
because that was the last stand of people like Cenk Uygur, who were like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, Mueller didn't look into his finances. Yeah, yeah. If you look at his last discussion with Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kalinske and all. No, Mueller limited his scope. He didn't look into his finances and stuff, and which is bullshit anyway. Because like Cenk Uygur never called Clinton a Russian puppet, even though he's been getting money from Russia pretty consistently. Everybody's been bribing the American president. Everyone. It's like that's what it is there for, really. It's, you know. So yeah, it's been an interesting stuff there.
Okay, so on that note, I think we're done. We don't have our typical feel-good story, and we didn't want to turn the whole Trump COVID-19 thing into a feel-good story, but hopefully it will be in a way a blessing in disguise. Maybe it will wake up some people with respect to certain things, and maybe we'll save one or two lives. But okay, so that's it. Anything to add?
No, thanks, whoever, for listening to this. And yeah, again, as always, we say we have a strong opinion, changes with evidence and better analysis. So if you guys think we are wrong on anything, mistaken on anything. Oh, we didn't do our call to actions properly this time around.
No, we skipped
But please do like and subscribe. And yeah, and again, on the Assange thing, please let us know if you think of any way we can help, or anybody can help. Just whatever. But yeah, that's it.
Okay, so
Goodbye
that's it, and see you all next week.